An opinion that was expressed in the comments from many of my viewers on my previous Juno-X video was that they thought the synth was somewhat overpriced for what it is. Now that aroused my curiosity, so I thought in today's video we can do a bit of research to see if that is really the case or not. So for our research today, I will be using Sweetwater because most of my viewers are from the USA. As I understand it, Sweetwater is one of the biggest musical instrument retailers over there. The prices are in US dollars then, and I think the way it works in America is that the prices are subject to some added tax depending on which state you live in. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but it doesn't really matter because in this video we'll just be comparing the relative prices of the different synths. Here in Europe it's slightly different. The prices already include the VAT, value added tax. It's called over here, or MOMS here in Sweden, where the price is actually a whopping 25% here in Sweden. So you guys in America that I think are paying like 10%, consider yourselves lucky. Okay, here is our baseline for today, the Roland Juno-X 61 key synthesizer. This has 4 digital tracks. It's not an analog synthesizer, even if it looks a little bit like one. It's got 4 digital tracks. Lots and lots of polyphony, depending on which of the models you're using, but we're talking 32 up to 256 note polyphony. It's got a drum machine built in, lots of different drum sounds. It's got a basic sequencer built in as well. And it's also got all the sounds from the XB5080, as well as its core purpose, which is to emulate the Roland Juno-6. But you can have lots of different notes going on at the same time on 4 different tracks, and then there's a drum track as well. So it's almost crossing into the workstation synthesizer territory here, I think. What else do you get? I haven't tried one myself yet, obviously, but it does have the aluminium front panel. I think it's a very highly built, professional, rugged instrument as well. It's got a 6-octave keyboard, which I think also is pretty nice quality with aftertouch as well. As you can see on the controls here, on the picture, pretty expansive and comprehensive set of controls to sculpt the sound exactly as you want. $2,000 is the price that Roland have set for their new Juno-X. I think a close competitor is the Nord Lead A1, which I've demonstrated previously on the channel. This is also a digital synthesizer that attempts to model the old analog synths of the 80s. It does a fantastic job, sounds absolutely wonderful. And this also will emulate Juno-X sounds to a T, no problem at all. This one, just like the Juno, can do 4 different tracks at the same time. So it's 4-part multi-timbral is the term for that. This one, if I recall correctly, has 24 voices spread across those 4 tracks. But it only does synthesizer sounds. It doesn't have the drum sounds. It doesn't have an extra drum track. There's no sequencer built in. As you can see, the keyboard is only 4 octaves. It's not a particularly excellent keyboard. It's okay, it's fine, I like it, but I don't think it's the same quality as you get on the Juno. It's got the wonderful Nord pitch stick and stone or aluminium mod wheel. I'm not sure what it's made of. But yeah, this is also a fantastically well-built quality synthesizer that I really love. But I would say it's a lot less capable and flexible than the Juno-X, which could be your all-in-one keyboard if you're doing a gig, I think. But look at the price, $2,000. So this one comes in at exactly the same price. They're actually pretty expensive over here in the US, I can see. They're a lot more cheaper over here in Europe, and especially in Sweden, where these are actually made. So the Juno-X also has a full set of Rompler style bread and butter sounds that you get from the XB5080. They're all loaded on board as well, as are hundreds of ZenCore sounds that are pretty fresh. So perhaps a more equivalent comparison would be to look at the Nord Wave 2 wavetable and FM synthesizer, where you can load your own samples on board. But this one is coming in at $2,900, although it does have a better keyboard, as you can see there, with 5 octaves. If I said 6 octaves for the Juno, I apologize, it's a 5-octave keyboard. This one has aftertouch as well. But yeah, you can see in comparison to this, the Juno looks relatively reasonably priced. We have some stiff competition coming in from Roland's own line of products. This is the bigger brother, the original instrument that was launched with the ZenCore and the model expansions. This is the Roland Jupiter X then, coming in at $2,800. What do you get for the extra $800? Well, you get a better keyboard. This one I think is even more premium than the one you get on the Juno-X. The control panel looks slightly more luxurious with even more knobs, buttons, faders and so on. The big difference here though is that it is modeling the Jupiter and not the Juno analog synth. Although to me that shouldn't really make any difference in the price, it's just a different set of algorithms. But there you have the Jupiter X, which is coming in $2,800. So in comparison to this, I think the Juno is looking quite reasonable. Now, this is a bit puzzling to me. I've demonstrated this on the channel. It's the Jupiter XM, which is a very small format version of the Jupiter X that I showed you just now. It's got much less controls. It's got mini keys. The build quality is pretty good for a keyboard of this type with mini keys. The top panel, I think, is aluminium, but the rest of it was made of plastic, if I recall. But this is coming in at $1,600. And who in their right mind would buy this when you can get the Juno for just $400 more, unless you really need to have something that's very portable and compact. But this, in my opinion, makes the new Juno-X look like a pretty good deal. Okay, for that money, you can get a pretty decent workstation keyboard as well. For example, here from Korg, we have the Nautilus 61, which I've also demonstrated here on the channel, and I have one of these as well. Now, you don't get a control panel like the Juno. Korg have decided that everything should be done on the touchscreen, with the exception of the 8 control knobs and a few buttons as well. So this one is very much a touchscreen and OS-driven synthesizer if you want to control the sounds in real time, which doesn't work out as well as it will do on the Juno, I give you that. But I think the Nautilus is a more flexible and powerful keyboard, perhaps. Using somewhat older technology because it's descended from the Korg Kronos. But just as an example of the price, $2,200, the Nautilus is a really well put together instrument that feels very high quality when you play it. The sounds are amazing, of course, as you've heard on my channel and other channels as well. But that's coming in at $2,200. I think in comparison to this, the Juno also seems to be pretty reasonably priced. Roland, of course, have their own range of music workstation keyboards. This is their flagship Phantom 6, coming in at a whopping $3,400, presumably plus tax if you're over there in the US. But this is an extremely capable synthesizer. It will do the Juno sounds. It may not have the exact model emulation, the model expansion that you get on the Juno-X, but I can assure you it's capable of pulling off those sounds from the Juno and the Jupiter and all of Roland's other classic synths, drum machines and so on. This is a fully fledged workstation, so it's a music studio in a all-in-one keyboard kind of design. Extremely capable, sounds fantastic, but you're going to pay a premium for this. If you're on a budget, we have the Phantom 06, the Phantom O series, I think Roland call it, for $1,500, which will do pretty much the same sounds as the flagship Phantom, but with a less premium feeling construction. The keys aren't as good, the screen I don't think is as good as well, and as you can see we don't have as many knobs, faders and sliders on the front panel here, but it's still looking pretty good actually. That's coming in at $1,500, which seems to be really nice value, I think. Okay, a lot of you in the comments were letting me know, or letting us know, that you could also buy a real analog synthesizer for that kind of money, or a lot less in fact. Yes, this is shy under $900 for a real analog 12 voice synthesizer from Beringer. And this is somewhat inspired, I think, by the Juno series as well. And it will do these sounds in a really good way, I think, is what I've read. I've never actually got to try one. But people really do quite like these synthesizers. I'm not sure if the build quality is up there with the Juno or the Jupiters from Roland. But yeah, a pretty nice capable synth. But remember, this is only 12 voice, whereas the Juno-X has 32 if you're using the Juno model expansion sound engine, or 256 perhaps if you're using the ZenCore engine. So it's actually quite limited in capabilities if you compare it to the Juno, and this is only capable of playing one part at the same time, I think, whereas the Juno-X can do 4, and it has the drums, which this doesn't have either. So even though this is much cheaper, it's much more limited in its capabilities. Certainly not an all-in-one board, but I'm sure it sounds pretty good, as many of you told me in the comments. So what about a premium analog synthesizer like this one, the Sequential Prophet Rev 208, costing $2,000, exactly the same kind of money as the Juno-X. You can get yourself a real analog synthesizer from the legendary Sequential company. Well, that seems like a pretty good deal, and I'm sure it sounds awesome, but again, it comes with a catch. This is only capable of playing 8 notes at the same time, whereas the Juno, because it's digital, can do so many more. This can only do 1 track at a time, so you couldn't build up an entire composition on this like you can on the Juno unless you wanted to multi-track it over and over again. To get the equivalent features that you're getting on the Juno, you'd actually need to buy 4 of these and a drum machine and a sequencer, and that's going to be like $10,000. But here you're getting an analog synthesizer, and as many of you have told me in the comments, analog sounds much better than digital. Why don't we talk about that? So yes, I know this is a delicate topic that raises a lot of strong emotions. I can tell you what my opinion is about this. Personally, for me, I don't care whatsoever what kind of chips are on the circuit board of a synthesizer. If they're analog chips or digital chips, I really don't care, as long as it sounds good. That's all that matters to me. Does it sound good or not? And I think this new generation of digital synthesizers that are attempting to emulate the analog synthesizers of the past do a pretty amazing job. To me, they sound just as good. I can't really hear the difference. And if you do a back-to-back comparison between, say, the Juno-X and the Juno-106, sure, you might be able to hear some slight differences. There are some slight differences, I'll give you that. But for me, I can't say which one sounds the better. I can't say one sounds better than the other. And you can only really hear that difference if you're doing a back-to-back comparison, if you have them both connected to your mixer and you're doing an A to B comparison. Otherwise, the digital virtual analog synthesizers sound just as good, certainly good enough. And the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, because when you get a digital synth, you get so many more notes of polyphony, you get the multi-timbral capabilities and so many other features as well. So for me, if it sounds good, I personally choose a digital synthesizer every day of the week. I guess the thing I struggle with is, why would you want to limit yourself to the technology of the 80s when the digital technology of today offers so much more? Let's move on. For me then, if it sounds good, then it is good. I don't care if the circuitry inside is analog or digital. It's all about how it feels when I play it. That's important. At the end of the day, it's all about what you play, not what synth you play. So after doing this comparison with similar synthesizers here, I've come to the conclusion anyway that the JUNO-X is fairly priced compared to the competition. Of course, it is still an awful lot of money, a really expensive instrument. And I kind of wish as well it had come in just a few $100s cheaper to really differentiate it from the Jupiter X. But still, it's a synthesizer that I one day hope to own. But after doing this research, it made me realize that perhaps synthesizers and electronic digital musical instruments in general are slightly overpriced. Take this for example. This is my Korg Cross 2, which you've heard many times on the channel. It sounds absolutely fantastic, but just looking at it, it's all made of plastic. It's not super high-end materials. The keyboard is fairly entry level and basic. Inside, I bet we just have a circuit board or two. It's got the external power supply wall wart thing, a few buttons and pads, and a pretty primitive screen. But this costs $800. And by the way, I'm not trying to single out the Cross here or Korg. All synthesizers at this price range tend to have similar qualities. Now, I'm a multi-instrumentalist and I'm very aware of the prices of other musical gear as well. And for $800, I can tell you, you can get a really nice premium acoustic or electric guitar. You could get a nice quality saxophone. You can get a pretty decent bass amp or a guitar amp. In fact, you can get a pretty kick-ass drum kit with all of the drums, a 5-piece drum kit with all the nice steel hardware, the bronze cymbals and everything, for less than $800 as well. When you think about that, a synthesizer like the Korg Cross for $800 starts to look a little bit expensive. And when you start looking at what you could buy for the price of, say, a Phantom, well, you could probably buy the instruments for an entire band for $3,500 plus the PA system and microphones. And I started wondering why that might be. The construction, the bill of materials to build something like the Korg Cross surely can't be that expensive compared to a drum kit or a saxophone, or the craftsmanship needed to build one surely isn't anywhere near what you would need to build a nice acoustic guitar. So why are these so much more expensive? I think it must be because we're paying a lot for the technology, the research and development. Presumably there's a team of developers in Japan or China or somewhere that are developing the operating system for these synthesizers, the circuit boards, and for every new synthesizer that's released, that's actually quite a considerable cost, I would imagine, to do all that development and programming. And then somebody has to go and sample all of the instruments, the guitars, the pianos, the oboes, the saxophones, the drums and whatever. And then you need a team of guys to design and make all of the sounds. This has got thousands of presets on board. All of those has to be designed, tweaked, built, named by a team of sound designers. And those guys and the developers that design and build these synthesizers are presumably not cheap. When you buy an acoustic guitar then, you're making your own sounds. But when you buy a synthesizer or electronic digital musical instrument, you're actually paying somebody else to make your sounds. And perhaps that's why they are relatively expensive compared to acoustic instruments. I think that's an interesting theory. What do you guys think? Let's try and wrap this up then. The conclusion I've reached is that the JUNO-X is not too expensive compared to other synthesizers, but synthesizers and electronic musical instruments are somewhat overpriced, according to me, at least compared to acoustic instruments. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to hearing your comments on everything I've discussed in this video. I'll see you next time. Cheerio.